The convoy stops at dawn. Dust hangs in the air like a curtain that will never fall. You can smell it, diesel fuel mixing with the ancient earth of the Helmand Valley. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a radio crackles. The soldiers check their watches. They have 4 hours before the meeting. 4 hours before they sit across from men whose fathers fought the Soviets in these same mountains. In one soldier's pocket is a folded piece of paper. It's a mission statement, revised 17 times by 17 different commands. By sunset, he will understand why the date on that paper no longer matters. This is the story of how a war survived longer than the reasons for fighting it. Let us go back to the beginning. If you're interested in stories about conflicts that outlived their own logic, consider subscribing. September 2001. The world watches as towers collapse in Manhattan. 3,000 people die in a single morning. The shock is absolute. In Washington, decisions are made within hours. Afghanistan harbors the attackers. Afghanistan will answer for it. The logic is simple. The anger is pure. Congress authorizes force with only one dissenting vote. On October 7th, the first bombs fall on Kabul. What happens next is swift. The Taliban government, already isolated and weak, collapses in weeks. By December, they are gone. Hamid Karzai stands in a borrowed suit, surrounded by tribal leaders who smell opportunity. American special forces, faces covered, walk through the corridors of power in a country they barely understand. CIA officers distribute cash in rooms where maps are decades out of date. The speed of victory becomes its own narcotic. Those who arrived in early 2002 would later describe the strangeness of it all. One recalled, "It felt like walking through a museum after closing time. Everything was already over." The diplomats arrive. The reconstruction experts unpack their laptops. The first contracts are signed. Roads will be built. Schools will open. Democracy will bloom in the Hindu Kush. On paper, it all makes sense. But in the valleys and the mountains, something else is happening. A man named Abdul Wahid returns to his village in Kandahar province in the spring of 2002. His home was destroyed in the bombing. His brother is missing. An American patrol passes through. They are handing out pamphlets printed in Kabul. The text promises reconstruction. Abdul Wahid cannot read. The patrol leader, a lieutenant from Ohio, asks through an interpreter if the Taliban are nearby. Abdul Wahid shakes his head. He does not mention that 3 of his cousins fought for them. He does not mention that they are hiding in Pakistan. He does not mention anything, because what he has learned is that silence is the safest form of speech. This silence will become a foundation. By 2003, attention shifts. Iraq erupts. Resources follow. Afghanistan becomes the other war, the one that is supposedly finished. Units rotate out. Generals move on. In Kabul, the international presence swells into a permanent city of compounds and checkpoints. A new class emerges: fixers, translators, contractors, young men in jeans and collared shirts who mediate between two worlds. They learn to tell foreigners what they want to hear. Optimism becomes a currency as valuable as dollars. In the provinces, the Taliban begin to return, not as an army, but as a shadow. A letter nailed to a mosque door in the night, a judge executed on his way to court, a school burned to its foundation. These acts are not random. They are communication. The message is clear. The foreigners will leave, and we will remember. In Khost, during a deployment in 2004, someone keeps a journal about building a clinic. The foundation is laid. Supplies arrive. Local officials attend the opening ceremony. Photographs are taken. 6 weeks later, the entry changes. The clinic has been shuttered. The doctors fled after receiving threats. The final line reads, "I don't know who we're helping anymore." The war is beginning to metabolize itself. The strategy evolves. More troops, different tactics. Counterinsurgency doctrine arrives like revelation. The theory is elegant. Protect the population, build institutions, win hearts and minds. The military distributes a manual. Commanders attend seminars. PowerPoint presentations multiply in headquarters briefing rooms. A Marine colonel explains to his officers that they are not just fighting, they are competing for legitimacy. But legitimacy cannot be airlifted. The Karzai government in Kabul grows increasingly ornate and increasingly hollow. Ministries bloom in new buildings, budget spreadsheets circulate, international advisors fill offices. But in the districts, authority flows through structures the foreigners cannot see. Tribal councils, religious networks, patronage chains that predate the nation itself. A governor, appointed from Kabul, arrives in his province to discover he has no real power. He controls what foreign money can touch. Everything else belongs to older systems. Money pours in, billions of dollars. It moves through channels, military contracts, development projects, infrastructure programs. A new highway is announced. The contract goes to a company owned by a minister's cousin. The highway is half built, then abandoned. The money disappears into accounts in Dubai. American auditors write reports. The reports are filed. Nothing changes. What emerges is not corruption in the conventional sense. It is a parallel economy, built on the temporary presence of a wealthy occupier. By 2007, second deployments reveal what first tours concealed. The valleys are the same. The villages are the same. The elders make the same promises. One letter home captures it. I don't think they're lying to us. I think they're just waiting. And they are waiting, because everyone understands the fundamental truth that only the Americans refuse to accept. This presence is temporary. But temporary is not a word Washington uses in its briefings. Instead, they send reinforcements. The surge arrives in 2009, 30,000 additional troops. The president announces it as a turning point. Commanders speak of breaking the Taliban's momentum. Units flood into Helmand and Kandahar. Outposts multiply across the landscape. Firefights erupt daily. Casualty reports stack up in headquarters. The statistics begin their own war. Enemy killed, territory cleared, districts secured. Each number is recorded. Each metric is tracked. Progress is measured in increments so small they require decimal points. In regional command headquarters, someone keeps two sets of maps. The official map shows areas of control, blue for government, red for Taliban, white for contested. The unofficial map shows only two colors, where we are and everywhere else. The second map is mostly empty of blue. In the villages, the war develops its own rhythm. American patrols in the morning, Taliban checkpoints at night. The population learns to navigate between these presences like water finding paths around stones. A farmer speaks respectfully to the soldiers who buy fruit from his stand. The same farmer pays taxes to the Taliban when they knock on his door after dark. This is not duplicity. This is survival in a landscape where power is contested by men with guns, and where choosing sides means death for you or your family. The archives from this period reveal a mounting awareness. Intelligence assessments grow more pessimistic. Provincial reconstruction teams file reports that contradict the official narrative. A State Department cable from 2010, later declassified, notes, "Our partners do not believe we will stay. Our adversaries believe they only need to wait. Neither assessment is wrong." But the war continues, because the alternative to continuing is admitting failure. Here is where the machinery becomes visible. The war is no longer driven by the original mission. Bin Laden is killed in Pakistan in 2011. The justification that started everything is extinguished in a compound far from Afghanistan. Yet the war does not end. Instead, new justifications emerge. We must protect the gains. We must support the Afghan government. We must prevent terrorist resurgence. We cannot abandon those who trusted us. Each reason is sincere. Each reason is insufficient. What persists is the institution of the war itself. The military rotation system ensures that every 12 months, a new cohort arrives. They receive briefings from the cohort they are replacing. They learn the local situation. They study the terrain. They develop their own strategies. 6 months in, they begin to understand the complexity. By 9 months, they are exhausted. By 12 months, they leave. The next cohort arrives. The cycle repeats. Institutional memory evaporates every year. Mistakes are repeated because those who made them are already gone. Solutions are attempted, fail, and are attempted again by officers who never knew they were already tried. The notebook kept by one Special Forces team leader on his 4th deployment contains a list. Tribal leaders he has worked with in his area of operations. Next to each name, the date they were killed, defected, or disappeared. By 2012, the list has 60 names. 43 are marked with one of those 3 outcomes. The margin note reads, "This is not sustainable." Washington rotates through its own cycles. Administrations change, generals retire, officials move to other assignments. The Afghanistan problem becomes a career obstacle, something to be managed and passed to the next person. Withdrawal timelines are announced, then revised. Troop levels decline, then increase, then decline again. The policy oscillates without resolution. The reason is simple. Ending the war requires accepting an outcome that looks like defeat. And defeat is the one thing the institution cannot metabolize. In the districts, the Taliban adapt and persist. They are not trying to win in the conventional sense. They are waiting. Their commanders are patient because patience is their strategic advantage. They live in the villages. They speak the language. They understand the terrain not as a map, but as home. When an American unit leaves an outpost, the Taliban return within days. The pattern is so predictable that local Afghans joke about it darkly. One month we see American flags. The next month, white Taliban banners. The flagpole is the same. 3 years in Nangarhar province, managing wells, schools, agricultural programs. Each one documented with photographs and reports for donors. When departure comes in 2014, the attempt to track their outcomes reveals a pattern. Half abandoned, a quarter controlled by the Taliban, the remainder existing in ambiguous functionality. The testimony before Congress later that year is brief. We built structures, they built loyalty. We had budgets, they had time. The government forces, trained and equipped at enormous cost, begin to hollow out. Corruption metastasizes in the ranks. Unit rosters are inflated with ghost soldiers who exist only on paper, their salaries pocketed by commanders. Equipment is sold on black markets. Outposts are abandoned without orders. The Afghan Air Force relies entirely on foreign contractors to maintain its aircraft. When police units are ambushed, they wait for American air support rather than fight. The dependency is complete. American advisors file increasingly desperate reports. They recommend reforms. The recommendations are ignored or implemented superficially. Everyone understands the problem, but solving it would require dismantling the patronage networks that hold the government together. The choice becomes accept corruption or accept collapse. Both options are unacceptable. So the war continues in the space between these impossibilities. By 2015, a dark clarity emerges among those paying attention. The war is no longer being fought to win. It is being fought to avoid losing. This is not a semantic distinction. It changes everything. Units are deployed not to seize territory, but to hold positions. Offensives are launched not to destroy the enemy, but to prove the enemy has not won. The entire apparatus grinds on, consuming lives and resources, producing nothing except its own continuation. The operating rooms at Bagram Air Base see Afghan soldiers and Taliban fighters in adjacent beds. The surgeon saves them both. They leave the hospital. Some return to their units. Some disappear. The question of which side anyone was on stops mattering. They will shoot at each other again. The job is to repair bodies. The war will provide an infinite supply. The soldiers begin to understand something their commanders cannot say aloud. They are not fighting for victory. They are fighting so that the decision to end the war does not happen during their rotation. Every deployment becomes a ritual of postponement. Hold the line, maintain the mission, pass the burden. The strategic objective is to make it to next year. The archives tell this story in euphemisms: consolidating gains, right-sizing the mission, conditions-based withdrawal. The language performs a function. It delays the reckoning. As long as the words remain optimistic, the policy can continue. To speak plainly, to say the war is lost, would require action. So the language bends and softens and obscures, and the war persists in the space created by that obscurity. Negotiations begin in earnest. Talks are held in Doha. The Taliban send representatives. The Afghan government is sidelined, then included, then sidelined again. The Americans want a dignified exit. The Taliban want complete withdrawal. Everything else is detail. The negotiations drag on. Ceasefires are proposed and violated. Agreements are drafted and unsigned. Behind the formality, everyone knows how this ends. The Taliban know they will return to power. The government knows it will collapse. The Americans know both these things and cannot say them. 12 years of translating for American forces. 23 separate documents required for the special visa application. All gathered. Then the waiting begins. The approval takes 3 years. During that time, 7 death threats, 4 moves with his family. When the visa finally arrives, the ticket to America is purchased immediately. At the airport, watching Kabul recede through the aircraft window, he remembers the promises. "We won't abandon you. We'll make sure you're safe." He believed them. They believed them too. The final withdrawal is announced. American forces will leave by September 2021. 20 years after it began, the machinery of departure accelerates. Equipment is packed, bases are dismantled, contracts are terminated. Flights outbound from Bagram increase daily. The Afghan forces are told they will endure. They are told they have the training. They are told they have the equipment. None of it is true, and everyone knows it. The collapse happens faster than even the pessimists predicted. Districts fall in days. Provinces fall in weeks. The government evaporates. Soldiers abandon their posts. Police discard their uniforms. The president flees the country. On August 15, 2021, the Taliban enter Kabul. They ride in captured American vehicles. They carry American weapons. They pose for photographs in the presidential palace. The circle is complete. At the airport, chaos concentrates into a single point. Thousands of people surge against the gates. They have worked with the foreigners. They have believed the promises. They have bet their lives on American staying power. Now they understand the wager has failed. Planes lift off, packed with desperate evacuees. Some cling to the landing gear. They fall. The cameras capture everything. The images circulate globally. The war that lasted 20 years ends in a spectacle of panic and abandonment. In the mountains, farmers return to their fields. Shopkeepers reopen. Life continues as it continued through every occupation, every conquest, every empire that believed it could remake Afghanistan. The villages persist. The valleys remain. The foreigners are gone. Now comes the counting. 2,500 American service members killed. The names are carved in stone. 6,700 wounded. Some walk with prosthetics. Some wake screaming. Over 100,000 Afghans dead. Soldiers, police, civilians, insurgents. The categories blur when bodies burn. $2 trillion spent. The numbers are recorded in official reports. They tell part of the story. But numbers cannot hold what truly disappears. There was a girls' school in Helmand. It operated for 6 years. The students learned English. They imagined futures beyond their villages. Then the school closed. The students returned to compounds and disappeared behind walls. There were judges who tried cases under Afghan law. They were executed in their homes after the Americans left. Their names exist in databases that nobody will access. Their stories survive only in memory. And memory is fragile in a place where remembering can kill you. The paper trail remains. After-action reports filed by officers who have since retired. They sit in federal servers, unread. Development assessments with photographs of ribbon-cutting ceremonies. The projects no longer exist. Photographs taken by soldiers who never looked at them again. Too painful. Casualty lists maintained with bureaucratic precision. Contracts for roads that were never finished. Each file is a fragment. Together, they compose a record of what was attempted, what was claimed, what was lost. The Taliban kept their own records. Notebooks, thumb drives, memory, lists of collaborators, notes on village politics, instructions for governance. These documents travel from hand to hand. They are retrieved from caches hidden in walls, buried in courtyards. They are used. A man who translated for American forces discovers his name on such a list. The knock comes at night. 3 men, no words. He is not seen again. The list was accurate. The list is always accurate. Back in America, the war fades quickly. Veterans return to towns that never thought much about Afghanistan. They do not speak about what they saw. The questions they receive are too small. What was it like? Did you see combat? These questions have no answers that fit into casual conversation. So silence becomes the final concealment. The war is buried in living memories that have no outlet. At barbecues, at family dinners, in the middle of the night when sleep will not come. The war lives there, unspeakable. Some try to explain it anyway. 3 tours, an essay that no magazine will publish. It describes standing in a valley in Kunar province, understanding in a single moment that his presence there accomplished nothing. The Afghan soldiers he trained would desert. The clinic his unit protected would close. The children who waved at his patrol would grow up to fight. The final line of the unpublished essay reads, "We were not lied to. We were not betrayed. We were simply replaced by the permanence of what was always there." The veterans' organizations file reports. Congressional hearings are held. Commissions investigate. The findings are consistent. Poor strategy, inadequate resources, unrealistic goals, lack of cultural understanding. The recommendations are earnest. Learn lessons, improve coordination, prepare better next time. The recommendations are filed. The institutions nod. Nothing fundamental changes. The capacity to repeat this mistake remains intact. History will record the Afghanistan War as the longest conflict in modern American memory. That framing is comforting because it suggests the war was unique, an aberration. But the comfort is false. The war lasted 20 years not because it was unusual, but because it revealed something usual: the ability of institutions to perpetuate themselves beyond their purpose. The machinery of war, once activated, develops its own momentum. Careers depend on it. Budgets justify it. Pride demands it. Ending it requires admitting not just failure, but the structural capacity for repeating that failure. In Afghanistan today, the same mountains remain, the same valleys, the same villages. A generation has grown up knowing only war. They will have children. Those children will hear stories, and in those stories, the Americans will recede into the role that the British occupy, that the Soviets occupy, another empire that arrived with plans and left with nothing but scars in the landscape and names on the walls of the fallen. The war ended not because the mission was accomplished, but because time simply ran out on the pretense that mission mattered. And the question that remains, the one that presses against the silence, is not why the war lasted 20 years. The question is what prevents us from doing this again.